welcome to Michigan Football at the Voice of College Football. I am one of your post-game hosts as well as a weekly contributor on the show, Desmond Upshaw. Thank you so much for joining us. I also have Mark Rogers with us here as well. Before we jump in, would like to encourage you to please like and subscribe. We are doing our best to grow this Michigan channel to Mark's biggest team channel. So that's our goal. But also, while you're at it, join Mark's main channel, The Voice of College Football, and also join his Discord to jump in on the conversation that is going on. So we appreciate it. And also, please like and share the video out on social media. Mark, how are we doing today?
Doing well, Des. Doing well, Des. We're in the portion of the year, you can probably relate to this being in Michigan. I'm in Connecticut, that we get the burst of spring, almost summer weather for a day or two, and then it pulls back to, it might as well be February again. And it's like, oh, seriously? Come on. I want this, this is supposed to be like every day now. It's May. It's May now. So, yeah, I've seen a little bit of everything like in the last 5 days. Like, I think it was, I forget exactly what day. It must have been Sunday, because I went out and went out and played some basketball, did some other things outside. And it was like the perfect day. It was 80 or 82 and sunny, like not a cloud in the sky, like blue skies. The next day, it felt like it was probably in the 50s, but it felt like it was like 31. It was such a contrast, and gloomy and gray, and yeah, it's all over the place right now. So
yes, agreed. And then we get the conundrum of, well, the weather app says that it's 60 degrees, but then you've got the wind that kind of factors in, and it just doesn't quite feel that temperature. Like on Friday, we went to my oldest daughter's soccer game, and according to the weather, it was 60 degrees, but I mean, I was very cold. I'm like, this probably feels like low 50s, high 40s. And then same thing today, where I was trying to get some work done outside, the actual like working, and had our dog outside too. But after like 20 minutes, I'm like, this doesn't feel like 60. It's supposed to be 60, but it's not quite that. So it's the battle that we deal with. Like you said, it's May. We're in the Midwest, Northeast, and it just we can't seem to really catch a break.
how long has your daughter been playing sports?
Shoot, she is 15 now, and probably since she was 4.
Okay.
So it's been a
you've
while.
been in this for a long time. Okay. I'm not going to tell you anything you don't already know. I was about to, but some people are going to be surprised when you say that your daughter's 15. You know that, right?
Yes.
Okay. That's a good thing.
Yeah, it is. It is. I'm happy with it. At first, I'm like, man, people always say I look young, but now it's one of those things you kind of wear it with a badge of honor. So I'm good with that.
For sure.
Perfect. So want to remind everybody as everybody is joining, please drop your comments in. We will make sure we get to them as we get rolling here. We've got Mark for a while, about a good hour, and we've got some things we definitely want to get into. But one of the first things, and I'll kind of just set the table, is I caught your live stream on your main channel where you kind of talked about just maybe just a change up in strategy of how you wanted to handle the main channel as well as the team channels. And I'll just kind of kick it off to you, and just a quick breakdown of just kind of the new movement forward.
On Monday night, we did a live stream, and we said, hey, for once, we're not talking any college football. If you want to talk college football, sorry, get out of here. We'll see you tomorrow. Because, we're talking college football constantly, and that's all we talk about. So I wanted to focus in, and I appreciate everybody's interest, their engagement, their care for the channel. Certainly, if nobody showed up and everybody's just like, just give us college football content, hey, I would understand that, but I appreciate all the people that take interest and care for what we do and want us to succeed. So we've got a main channel in which we are going to focus on just delivering national topics. So that's going to be focused around call-in shows that are nationally based. Now, obviously, people will call in about their particular teams, but there's going to be a national narrative to it that we're going to take on ratings and rankings. And of course, the college football playoff system is always front and center in terms of people's discussion and the debate, and NIL and all the things that are of national relevance, and comparing conferences and in all of those things. Now, there are going to be examples of particular teams used, but there's going to be a national focus. Just to be very brief about that, on the main channel, again centered around a call-in show that I appreciate everybody. It seems like it's the favorite thing that we do, is the call-in show, and people love the call-in show, and I do it as well. It's great. So the team channels are more for the hardcore, the people that want the beat. They want the, break down the linebacking core, preview spring practice, recap spring practice. They want the everyday grind of who was the last commit. Okay, we got an offensive tackle from, Saginaw, Michigan, break that down. They want the grind. So we will provide the team beat, daily beat, the grind here at the Michigan channel. And I'm just noticing, hey, Des has the blue on. The Michigan blue, and I pretty much have the Michigan blue on as well. Look at the banner. We pay attention to details here. The Michigan helmets perfectly placed. So along that line or narrative, everybody, we are going to provide the beat of Michigan football, as we have to the best of our abilities. But we're constantly wanting to strive and do better and bring more content, and better yet, more quality content all the time.
Yeah, and that was a term, and I didn't get a chance to watch the entire stream, but that was a term that I heard you mention a couple times, was quality content, not just, just putting out a lot of it, but putting out quality content. So, wanted to encourage everybody, if you are a Michigan fan, to like and subscribe to this channel, as well as Mark's main channel. And I like the strategy and just kind of the vision moving forward, because I think, for myself, I know when I first came across your content and your videos, if you're not someone who pays like really close attention to the actual channel that you're looking at, like you could easily hop into a couple different of your channels and not really know it, and just kind of keep diving in. Because when it comes to like content and things like that, YouTube is one of the biggest ones that I go to. So I can remember, driving to work and just hooking up the auxiliary and, hit play, and, I'm just driving and listening. So I like the vision, and, it's one of those things too, where, it's more reason for a Michigan fan to subscribe to this channel, so they can stay tuned in. But,
very cool.
Yeah, no, it was really good. So
yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, wanted to definitely touch on that. So well, I'll have you pick this one, Mark. So would you want to get into the Michigan draft players, or kind of talk about the Jim Harbaugh coaches rankings that you actually had did? And I believe you had Jimbo Fisher and Mark Stoops just ahead of Harbaugh. So kind of wanted to talk about that, or we can do the Michigan draft players. Which one?
We can run through the NFL draft, and in the meantime, I will attempt to be able to. I don't know if I've got any control on this stream to be able to pull up the actual graphics that go along with the coaches' rankings, or maybe we can do that another time. But we can start with the draft.
Okay. So yeah, obviously we have Aiden Hutchinson, who was the number 2 pick, and it's so funny because literally last week I had mentioned how I was hoping he wasn't the number 1 pick, just because I am unfortunately a Lions fan. But yeah, Lions drafted him number 2. I believe after Aiden was Dax Hill, who went 31st to the Cincinnati Bengals. And we go down to David Ojabo, who unfortunately had the injury during the pre-draft process. He went to the Baltimore Ravens. You had Hassan Haskins get drafted, and I believe Andrew Stuber was the last draft pick. And then a handful of players ended up getting undrafted free agent contracts. So, 5 players drafted. I think that's a pretty good it's a solid draft, especially when you look at where the guys went. I would even kind of put an asterisk next to David Ojabo and call him a first rounder as well. So you're talking about 3 first rounders essentially off of that defense and that team, which is not surprising when you look at how well they played. But want to get your thoughts on just the Michigan draft overall. The guys drafted and get your input on it.
Yeah, in terms of those particular players going to those specific franchises, I don't have a whole lot there in terms of understanding where their roster stands right now. But for Michigan, and I don't think, especially in this day and age, with what players' goals are coming out of high school at a place like a Michigan and an elite school, a football playing school, that you can look past the NFL draft and just figure as a college football fan, hey, I only care about what Michigan does. They're off and running to the NFL. Great for them, whatever. But it's important. I just think it's a recruiting tool. It's a promotional tool. It's there. The most viewership is at the outset of the draft and then throughout the first round. And of course, Aiden Hutchinson being the highest Michigan drafted player, I believe, since like 2008. Jake Long was up there. Somebody else I'm forgetting. Taylor Lewan was a high draft pick. I think they were the last 2. I actually saw there was an back and forth on Twitter because somebody had posted, this is Michigan's highest, or Michigan has not had an offensive player drafted this high or in the first round since Braylon Edwards in 2005. But then the 2 tackles went, and there was an argument over skill position players between offensive players. Yes, they were tackles. And so again, there's been a drought in Michigan football when it comes to high profile players. And again, for the football fan, for the college football fan, for the people that dive deep into it, certainly you can name off a lot of successful Michigan players moving on to the NFL. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying for the person or the college football, soon to be college football player that doesn't really follow all of it. They get caught by, okay, who was number 1? Who are the top 5? That catches their eye. And when Michigan's been absent from that for a long time and now can put a name in there that, oh man, this dude Hutchinson was drafted 2nd. He was a top pick. Okay, that puts Michigan back among those elite schools right at the top of the draft. And I think that means a lot.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, and I heard someone say it on one of the sports shows, but it was essentially that kids coming out of high school, especially the high level guys, want to typically 3 things: be developed, they want to win, and they want to get drafted high in the NFL. Like, those are the main 3 things. And if you can show that with a track record and kind of the tangible proof, then you've always got a shot at those high level guys. And I think with Michigan having the year that they had last year, and obviously you're hoping that you're going to continue that trend into this year. I mean, that's exactly what you want to see. So it was something cool to see. And like I said, I think those are really, really good football players that were drafted. So now, for Jim Harbaugh, the tough part with being a high level college coach is you do a great job of developing guys, winning, you get them drafted. Now you got to start back over to replace those guys. Now you got to develop even more guys. And, so it's a consistent process that you have to, it's just nonstop. It's ongoing. And the better you do, it almost is the more difficult your job is, because, you develop a guy like Aiden Hutchinson and Dax Hill and Ojabo, and now you've got to replace guys that are that well, so, play that well. So it's a difficult thing to do, but the high level guys do it really well.
And if anything, Harbaugh's he's been fortunate that he's been able to produce NFL players, but they've stuck around for the 4 years. I think what you're talking about as well are the Alabamas and LSUs. I know that LSU has gotten just ravaged. I think at one point it may have changed the numbers, but there was a period of time where LSU lost more early entries into the NFL draft, I should say, than any school. And you see the examples of teams that just get torn up, programs that get torn up by those kind of exoduses, like LSU in 2020 following the magical 2019 run, versus the teams, and there's very few, that are able to weather that year after year after year because their program is just so stockpiled.
Yeah. And you wonder how that is going to impact a team like Georgia, who I believe had a record. I think it was a record of defenders drafted and maybe draft picks. I can't remember
Draft
specifically
picks for
what
a
it was.
7-round draft. Yep.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, it unreal. And then, a lot of those guys went on the defensive side of the ball, but just, to have that amount of talent, leave and try to replace it. I think Georgia's in really good hands. I think they recruit well. So I don't think it's going to be an issue where they fall off the cliff or anything like that. But you also look at LSU in that 2019 season, and it was magical and unreal. And then you follow it up with going 500. Now, I think a good chunk of that had to do with quarterback play and just a lot of things behind the scenes going on at LSU. But nonetheless, that's a pretty recent tale of, I mean, this is harder than some of these coaches make it seem.
Absolutely. And, I don't think Michigan's going to implode. I don't think they're going to cave in. I do doubt whether they're at a place that can just reload. I think they're going to miss some players that we've just mentioned that for them are pretty special players. And not to discount them, they're special players, period, but are more common at a place like Alabama or Georgia than they are at Michigan. And, I may be proven wrong. And again, I'm not predicting 6-6 this year. I'm just saying that it's going to be quite a bit to overcome. The schedule plays into their hands. So, and how quickly college football coaches and staffs, the coaching staff, need to develop these teams. And if you do catch a scheduling break like Michigan has this year, you can turn a team into a much different team in week 6 or 7 than they were in week 1. And hey, if you're able just to out talent most of the schedule, get by, maybe play one tough opponent, survive it, then shoot, these guys are, if you're as good a coaching staff as they should be at Michigan and other places, and you've recruited well, then you're turning players that were making mistakes in the first couple of weeks of the season into really good players that aren't really freshmen after 8-9 games under their belts. Then you can still turn it into a special season and contend.
Yep. And like you said, they definitely have the schedule this year, to especially out of conference, to be able to develop those guys and probably make a few more mistakes than you typically would. I took a look because I just saw an article of Michigan's out of conference schedule, and this year and next year are pretty soft. I think that's a good term for it, but Michigan does have, they have Oklahoma in a home and home, if I'm not mistaken, Texas in a home and home. And I think those start in 2024 with one of the teams. I think it's Texas first, and then Oklahoma the following year, and then Texas, Oklahoma in that home and home, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't have it in front of me. I know that those are out there, those two series. And, part of me wants to bash Michigan for their non-conference schedule, because I just think that shouldn't happen, that you're not playing anyone in the non-conference. But half of me wants to say, well, there must be some kind of explanation. And I don't know what that is, because Michigan doesn't dodge teams. They're not out to build an easy schedule. I've certainly attacked other schools across the country because they have a history, they have a trend of figuring out, okay, how could we, comprise the easiest non-conference schedule possible and puff up our record. So I do take my shots at some other programs, but Michigan, that's not been Michigan. They schedule that one difficult non-conference opponent that's pretty standard, but for whatever reason, they weren't able to find a match for these 2 seasons or whatever it was. But I don't like to see that for anybody of Michigan's caliber, to kind of skate through 3 non-conference games that are what they are, and they really don't tell us much. And they should be playing somebody, especially since the Washington game, not to Michigan's, not to blame Michigan, not their responsibility, but that didn't turn out to be the opponent that it should have been either. So it's been, I don't know who they played in 2019. They played Notre Dame, and I don't know if they played anybody else. I think that was their one big non-conference game in 2019. So 2020 was an all-conference schedule. So they haven't played anybody of note since 2019. It's going to be like 4 consecutive seasons.
Yeah, it's tough because on the what I will give, like you mentioned, it's not Michigan's fault that Washington wasn't great, but also I believe the year before they were supposed to play, I think that was half of the home and home, and they had the COVID year, so that ended up being just a conference only schedule. So they kind of threw things off a little bit, but like you said, there are teams. I mean, there are teams that do it. So it's difficult to bash them because, like, I think we're in the same boat of I like to see those out of conference matchups and like to see those ranked teams play each other. So that's always an exciting thing to see. But I guess at the end of the day, you just got to take advantage of it. I think the worst part for me would be to have this type of out of conference schedule and then end up with 2 or 3 losses. Like that's the thing you would look at and just say, really, like you had this opportunity where you're almost gifted 3 wins and you end up, in what 6 or 9 other games you drop 3. Like that's not ideal, but I know the SEC catches a lot of flack of the week before rivalry week. They get the get the cupcakes and things like that. So I'm not gonna go too crazy about it, but yeah, would especially this year, and you get it 2 years in a row. So you'd love to come out of it a Big Ten champion and really be able to show like, hey, we are really good. It's not just our schedule. Like we played well. We were one of the top 4 teams or top 5 teams in the country, and we were able to show that we were indeed that, and it wasn't just a soft schedule of why we got to where we did.
For sure. Yep.
You never know. You never know. Okay, so let's dive in to the Harbaugh ranking. So if I'm not mistaken, I thought you had Harbaugh at either 10 or 9, and
Finally
just
found the video here. Yeah.
okay. I was gonna say, and I think you had Stoops and Jimbo Fisher were just ahead of him. So wanted to kind of get your take on that, and and kind of see what our viewers think about that as well.
Sure. So to give some context to it, surprise, surprise, Nick Saban's number 1. I've got Dabo Sweeney at number 2, Kirby Smart at number 3. As I shuffle through this video, my number 4 coach is Brian Kelly. Number 5 is Kyle Whittingham. At 6, I've got Ryan Day, Jimbo Fisher at 7. And just in front of Jim Harbaugh at 9, come on, is, can I remember?
I want to
Mark
say
Stoops,
it was Stoops.
Kentucky at number 8.
Yep.
Harbaugh at 9, and then to round out the top 10, I'm doing the 5-second shuffle ahead.
I was going to say, I don't remember who was number 10.
Pat Fitzgerald, Northwestern at number 10.
Ooh, okay. Got it. So that's a pretty solid. That's a really good group, I think, of top 10 coaches. And at first, I went back and forth in my head on it on Jimbo Fisher. He was the first one I kind of looked at, and I thought to myself, I feel like Jim Harbaugh has performed better at Michigan than Jimbo has at Texas A&M, which I think I feel correct in that. But when you also factor in Florida State, I think that's where Jimbo overtakes Jim Harbaugh because he has the national championship. Florida State I mean, it's a blue blood, but I mean where they were under under Jimbo Fisher was a powerhouse. I mean they were handling the ACC, and like I said with Jameis and the extreme amount of talent that they had coming from that team was really impressive. Mark Stoops is one where I kind of go back and forth. I think it's close. I think it's really close. But I would agree, and I think part of your take was that Mark Stoops has done more with less than Jim Harbaugh has done. If I'm remembering
Sure.
that correctly.
Yeah. So the first thing I would say to anybody who's going to attack my rankings or anybody else is put yourself in that place. So it's easy to say that number 4 or that number 14 or whatever, but do this task, do the entire list yourself, because that I think hits home in terms of how difficult this is, rather than just kind of nitpicking at number 5 and number 8 and number 11. Put the whole list together, and then give it to a number of people that you respect as college football fans. And believe me, regardless of what your order is, people will be able to find holes in it and be able to question it, because it is what it is. I explained after I did this that from 4 to like 11 or 12, like 4 to 12, that I would have no issue if somebody said 4 should be 9 and 10 should be 6 and all over the place, because there's that much in my estimation, looking at 4 to 12, that I had like razor close. So that's the first thing I'll say, is that, not each spot is created equal. There can be, 10 spots that are just packed in, and it's a razor close decision. Then you've got, not looking at your example in comparison between Jimbo and Harbaugh, but in a lot of the other ones, like with Stoops, like with Fitzgerald, the difficulty becomes comparing somebody at Ohio State, where they've got everything they could ever want or need to build a powerhouse, versus you're at Northwestern. Okay. You can't just compare their records, because then forget it. Pat Fitzgerald's number 50. But you got to try to weigh in, okay, what's a good job at Ohio State versus what's a good job at Northwestern? Meaning, who's doing a better job? So that's difficult. But the Fisher-Harbaugh comparison, fine. You can win at either place. You got the resources you got. So that's a fair judgment. So the other thing was, I was making an attempt not to judge coaches on their entire career. It wasn't like a career achievement ranking. It was more about, who do I think's doing the job right now? How would I rank them right this second? Now, that doesn't mean that if a coach went 3-9 last year, but he had this great career before that he's horrible all of a sudden, and you drop him 50 spots. That's a balancing act too. So Jimbo Fisher's national championship didn't weigh in to a large extent for me, because again, I'm looking more at the job that he's doing at Texas A&M, and I guess I'm also projecting toward the future. So Harbaugh takes over a pretty marginal football program, turns it around into like a top 10 or 12 team overnight. So kudos to him. And then, was a top 15 team for basically his tenure, had his issues there for a year and a half, and didn't perform well, and still hasn't against top 5, top 10 opponents overall. But then, boom, he has this big season. Where Jimbo's kind of building something, and Texas A&M has never hardly been anything close to what Michigan is historically. Like, Texas A&M has been winning 7 and 8 games forever. They for all the money and resources and how much they love football down there, Texas A&M, until I got to say someone in Manziel kind of changed things. I don't know if I can credit them. Partially, I will. I think a lot of things and entering the SEC changed things. They became a they haven't fulfilled the promise, but they've become well, we expect Texas A&M to win. They're pouring a lot of money into it and resources, and they pack 100,000 people in there, and they've got Texas football recruits, surrounding them. They should win. There's an expectation now that Texas A&M should win, just like, fill in the blank. But that's not been their history. They have not been. They're not even a top 25 program in their history. They've just basically mounted 7-5 and 8-4 seasons on top of each other forever. So this is a pretty recent thing. Now, somebody's going to point out the exceptions. Now, I'm not talking about the exceptions that they've made every 15 or 20 years. But so I'm crediting Jimbo for what he's building now, even though the results, other than a top 5 finish 2 years ago, haven't really come. It's been these last few recruiting classes, especially the last one, has been crazy good. So I gave him the nudge on that one, and he has proven that he can win a national championship.
Yeah, and I think that should factor into it, and maybe not, be heavily weighted. And obviously, we're not talking that Jimbo was number 2 and Jim Harbaugh was 9. Like, we're literally at this point splitting hairs. So yeah, it is interesting, and even with Texas A&M, like, with the Manziel and Sumlin, I think the best year they had was like 10-3 years. So I mean, it was
11-2.
11-2.
Yeah.
Okay,
the year he won the Heisman.
Okay, so they still, I mean, that's a terrific season, especially at with Texas A&M standards. So still a really good year, really good season. But yeah, I would agree. They are just 7-5, 8-4. I mean, the consistency is pretty incredible to see that they consistently are there at 7 and 8 wins every year.
Des, to show you how seriously some people take these rankings, one guy contacted me and said, Harbaugh at number 9, da 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 da. Well, until I figured out who it was, I thought Harbaugh number 9. What are you complaining about? Are you complaining he's too high, like he should be number 2, or are you complaining like he should be number 20? Like, I didn't know how to take that.
Mm-hmm.
So if I would have had him number 2, I'd have thought, okay, I understand where he's coming from. But shoot, you could argue him higher or
lower,
a little lower. But anyway, the perspective of this guy, Ohio State fan, was how dare you? And I'm canceling my Patreon, and you ranked Harbaugh way too high, and I always liked you, and da 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 da. And I'm like, seriously, because I ranked a coach you don't like too high. What's he supposed to be ranked? Like, the guy is winning like 75 or 80% of his games, and he just won the Big Ten championship. I'm not going to rank him like 37th.
It's like, that was the straw, Mark. You know what? I can deal with you having these other team channels. I can deal with you having a call-in show, and I call in and you don't always get to me. But you ranking Jim Harbaugh number 9, that's it. I just can't. I can't support what you're doing. I can't. That's it. That's it for me. That's a straw that broke the camel's back. Yeah, it's. I mean, like you said, I think it is something that you're. It's splitting hairs at this point, but I think the thing that I appreciate the most is that when you do the rankings, that you not only, list where you have each coach and you have the rankings, but you go through, I would say, in depth for each coach and why, you go to bat for all of your takes, where you say, hey, Jim Harbaugh's number 9 and here's why. And you go into, what you're basing it off of. So it's not just, I think that, to me, proves that it's not just a kind of the shock value, like I'm just looking to get a reaction out of people. It's no, I've put some time into this. Here's what I think. Here's why I think that, and then going from there. So it is a very, I think that's a difficult thing to do as far as ranking the coaches and going through and even having the criteria that you did, because I'm another person who's a huge fan of Pat Fitzgerald and what he does there. But some people would just look at it and say, it's Northwestern. What did they do last year? What have they done recently? And it's like, well, I mean, he did get them to the Big Ten championship within the last, I want to say 2-3 years, so
Twice
that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And, this isn't a knock Jim Harbaugh thing. We're just kind of discussing it, but he got to Indianapolis before Jim Harbaugh did. So it's one of those things that I think it still he should be commended for what he's doing, but I think there's just a ceiling at Northwestern. Like you mentioned, do you have the resources to do everything that you want to do? And maybe Fitzgerald does, but but I think he also does understand what that ceiling looks like is, we're not going to have the facilities of Texas A&M and Alabama and Michigan, LSU, but we're going to just put everything into these kids that we have, and you might beat us, but it's going to be tough and you're going to be sore the next day. So I can appreciate what Fitzgerald does, but it is very difficult to rank all of the coaches because there's so much that goes
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah. You love the NFL. We could rank the 32 NFL head coaches, and sure, there would be some consideration given to, okay, well, he took over a difficult situation but the difficult situations are by a good front office and good management and a good owner are fixed pretty quickly. Look at the Bengals. Look at, a zillion different examples over the last 10 or 20 years. They're all operating with billions of dollars, and they're all pretty, you can't say poor Jacksonville, poor this. No, they're
Yep.
all in the NFL. They all get a cut of that, national TV contract. They're all operating in the same level.
Correct. Yeah. And it's very different in college football. As we know, you've got different, boosters at different levels and boosters with different generosity. And it's different. It's different. I think it definitely shows kind of the difference in college football. And I think the tough part especially with the NIL just kind of being all over the place at this point, is I think on one hand it's going to be very different in the NIL is turning into free agency, but on the other hand, I feel like it's still going to be relatively the same where there's only going to be 7 or 8 teams, maybe less than that really that have a realistic chance of winning a national title each year. So it's going to be for different reasons, but I feel like it's still going to be the consistent few when it comes to winning national championships or just being in the college football playoff just kind of on a regular basis. So it's
Hey,
interesting.
Des, the time got away from me. I completely forgot. Well, we've got our Florida State show at 6.
Okay,
So I got all those people hanging out, and I lost track of time, and it's like 10 after. So
no
I'm going to
problem.
run. Have a
All
great
right,
rest of the show.
thanks,
Appreciate it.
Mark. So, wanted to switch gears and kind of talk a little bit about just the difference of this season versus last season when it comes to Michigan, because as I get into it and talk more about it, it's a very difficult thing to be the hunted versus being the hunter, correct? So, when you talk about teams, especially, and let's keep it in the Big Ten to keep it relevant, and our big rivals, Ohio State, right? There's a difference between just having a week where you're just going through your normal preparation and you always want to win. So I don't want to make it seem like that's going to be anything different. You want to win no matter who you play, whether it's Rutgers, Maryland, Iowa, whatever the case may be. You always want to win and perform your best. But there is a difference when you're playing that team. And I for instance, Ohio State, when you're playing that team that usually is the Big Ten champion, the team that was in the college football playoff the year before, or the national championship, whatever the case may be, you get up a little bit more for that game, no matter what anybody tells you, because everybody wants to have a huge game against that team. Well, this year it's going to be Michigan. Michigan is going to be that team that teams get up for. They want to come out and beat the defending Big Ten champions. I truly believe that. And I think Michigan is well equipped to be able to handle that. But nonetheless, it is going to be, I think, a just new territory for him. And I think the coaching staff, I think the leaders on the team are going to have to do a really good job when it comes to having the players realize this and consistently having that challenge and consistently challenging the players on the team and the leaders of good enough is just not that's not good enough. Just getting through the drills. You've got to be able to really push yourself, and it's an onus thing. You've got to put it on yourself to be able to consistently strive for better, and that just getting through practice is not good enough. Like it's definitely got to be more than that. It needs to be almost I don't want to call it psychotic, but it's got to be an obsession that you have to understand that you're the team that you watched on film, right? So say you're playing Iowa, the Iowa team that you saw play Rutgers, you're not going to get that same Iowa team. You're going to get that team +2. You're going to get every one of the teams that you play on their schedule. You're going to get their best. And graded in the non-conference, I don't think it's going to be that big, a huge deal. But as far as when you get into the conference and you get those big games, I mean, Penn State is going to want to knock Michigan off. Michigan State's going to want to do it. They're going to say, we beat you last year. Ohio State's going to be, on a whole nother level. I mean, every team that you play, Maryland, Rutgers, Nebraska, like all of those teams are going to want to be the team to beat the defending Big Ten champions. So I think that'll be a really big challenge for that coaching staff. And it at the end of the day, it gets laid to Jim Harbaugh to be able to get the guys focused and get them aware of what is going on. Motivation, that's an internal thing. I think each one of the players needs to do a good job as far as handling that on your own. I mean, it's not your coach's job to motivate you. It's their job to prepare you. So it'll be an interesting thing to see how Michigan navigates that. And I don't think we'll really see the difference until probably week 4 or 5 when they play Iowa. I think that'll be a really interesting game. Obviously, it's a rematch of the Big Ten championship from just this past season. So that part will be interesting to see just how Michigan's able to navigate that. Do you have a slip up, or do you rise to the occasion where you get a team's best and you come out and play your best? That'll be a really interesting thing that I'll be kind of taking a look at in trying to see if I can notice any differences when it comes to just how Michigan operates versus previous year, because it does make a difference. It makes a difference being the one that everybody's trying to get to. So it'll be really interesting to see. I'll get to a couple questions now. So Dependent Fanatic says Michigan has to be innovative on offense, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. One of the topics I thought about bringing up was the topic of is Michigan's offensive philosophy or strategy, is that discouraging 5-star receivers from coming to Michigan? And the reason I say that is I took a look at stats and stuff from the previous year, and just talking about the receivers. I mean, the leading receiver last year was Cornelius Johnson, and he had like 620 yards receiving. And you look at other players, and granted, I mean, this guy is a high level player, but the Biletnikoff winner last year, I think his name's Addison, but the Pittsburgh receiver who's in the transfer portal, I mean, he had 1,500 yards, last season. Guy like, Jamison Williams, John Mechie, I think both of those guys were over 1,200 yards last year. Ohio State, I think, had 3 guys over 1,000 yards or pretty darn close to it. It's just one of those things where it may be something that is hindering them. I'm not quite sure. I think that number one, you've got to get the quarterback to run an offense like that, and I think they do with JJ. Now, navigating that is going to be something in and of itself, but I think they have the quarterback now. So ideally, you'd like to start to get some of those high level receivers, because I think it's that's the next step when you're talking about getting to the next level, right? We talked about that a week or two ago about what does Michigan have to do to get to the Georgia and Alabama level. And I think step one is getting that big time recruit, that 5-star guy. And I think they've gotten that in JJ. The next step is going to be getting those pieces around him. I think you've got some of them. You've got Blake Corum, you got Donovan Edwards, you got some guys who are explosive. Ronnie Bell, if he comes back from that injury and is what we expect him to be, you've got some weapons there. But I think you need more when you come to, because you've got Ronnie Bell's your guy who's going to be probably your slot receiver, but when you talk about the outside guys, the guys who, Cornelius Johnson, those positions, you got to be able to get deep and just have the explosive receivers. And you look at Ohio State, just had two of those guys go in the draft. Smith and Jigba is going to be another one who's coming pretty soon. I mean, that dude's pretty special, but it'll be important to now take that next step in that progression to get to that elite status. 'Cause I think that's what Michigan is trying to do, is get to that elite status. So the next step, I believe, will be getting some of those really special kids on the outside to really be able to change that offense. But like I said, you've got to have the quarterback to be able to get the ball to him, and I think they have that now. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I agree, Dependent Fanatic, and thanks for tuning in. Yeah, I don't know if I would call it a fluke. I don't think. I think I would call it a fluke if that Ohio State game looked different. But yeah, maybe an awakening. I'm good with that. I'm good with that. Otis John Jr., thanks for tuning in. Thanks for the comment. Said they all wanted to beat Michigan last year. And I agree. I don't think you're wrong in that, but I think there is a difference from being another team on the schedule versus being the team on the schedule. Like the team that everybody is looking at, knowing that this game's going to be on, prime time or, whatever the case may be, that major slot. And I know we're going to be on national TV. Like that makes a difference. That makes a difference. Or at least I think it does make a difference. But, I think, yes, I think everybody wanted to beat Michigan, and because Michigan has that certain cachet. They're one of the blue bloods, all-time winningest program, Heisman Trophy winners, Jim Harbaugh. You've got just so many things that bring a certain amount of cachet. And now you team on top of that, defending Big Ten champions, college football playoff final. We made it, to the Final Four. Like that changes things. So while I agree that yes, everybody wanted to beat Michigan, I think this year it's gonna be on steroids a little bit. So we will see. Rob J, I like being able to utilize Edwards in the passing game, something that hasn't happened in the past. Yeah, he had a couple games. I think it was that Maryland when he had, I think, like 7 or 8 catches. Yeah, I mean, I think having Edwards and being able to supplement him within the passing game, that takes more pressure off of your pass catchers, off of your wide receivers, and the offense just as a whole, to be able to, throw it to him on a little choice route or swing pass, whatever the case may be, and have him. I mean, that he was impressive last year, and hoping to see the same things from him this year and improvement. But yeah, he can be something special. And what I would like to see, kind of going back off of the innovation point on offense, and I'd love to see Edwards and Corum both on the field at the same time. I mean, I don't see why that can't happen. I think both of those guys are skilled pass catchers. They can both run the ball. They can both run routes. I don't see why both of those guys couldn't be on the field for a decent amount of snaps. So Maze Pylon, thanks for joining, and thanks for the comment. Says, I think they'll want to come to Michigan after watching JJ this year. I certainly hope so, and I think it'll be important to see, for those recruits, to see more downfield passes. I know Michigan led the football in 50+ yard plays last year, but I think you'll need to see more of the just downfield, ball in the air type of plays in order to get those guys. And you'll also need the stats. Like it's almost an anomaly that Michigan didn't have a 1,500 yard receiver and led the nation in 50 plus yard plays. It's very interesting, but I think number one, it shows how explosive your running backs were, and just how selective that Michigan was as far as their play calling and taking the deep shots. But I think they did a good job. But I think this year the offense is going to have to take a little more. They're just going to have to carry a little more weight versus when last year, when it was mainly the defense. So we'll see what happens. And the tough part is that we're not really going to see here's my thoughts of the first 3 weeks. We're probably not going to see that much. Like you're going to see most likely myself and Dre on the post game complaining, talking about I'd love to see more, but at the same time, I mean that's what I wanted to see last year, and Michigan ended up winning the Big Ten, beating Ohio State, beating Penn State. So I think it'll be one of those things that, with experiencing last season, I'll probably have a little more patience this season. But you know, we'll see. I mean, it's difficult because you know I had to eat crow because I was someone who was adamant that throwing the ball this few times in these games that you know you're going to win is just not a recipe for success. And they ended up developing the run game so well that you were able to run the ball in those you know big games and big moments and control the game and control the clock, and you took shots when you needed to, and you got to the you won the Big Ten, you got to the college football playoff. So you know I'm gonna be that guy. I'm gonna sit and wait because that's about all I can do. Dependent Fanatic says JJ must start. I feel bad for Cade. It's a very difficult situation, and I think the situation would have been easier if JJ had a healthy spring. If he was able to, you know, go through spring practice and all that good stuff, and who knows, maybe Cade wouldn't have transferred, but if Jim Harbaugh names JJ the starter in spring, that potentially gives Cade the opportunity before the May 1st deadline that just passed to get in the transfer portal if that is what he wants to do. I do not know Cade personally, so I have no idea what that would have looked like for him. But if that was something that he wanted to do, that would have been able to give him that path to be able to make the transfer in May, you know, and then all summer you're learning the new playbook, so on and so forth. I mean, I think it was the same timing as Joe Burrow, which, I mean, he's the exception, not the rule. But it is interesting because, you know, Cade hasn't done anything wrong to potentially lose his starting spot. It's just seeing how special the kid is behind you. That's what Cade did wrong, and which still he's got no control over that. To a different level, it's the Trevor Lawrence and Kelly Bryant situation where, you know, after week 4, they made the decision to go to Trevor Lawrence. I don't think it was anything that Kelly Bryant did wrong. I mean, he had just taken Clemson to the college football playoff and, you know, won the ACC. So it wasn't anything he did wrong. It just, that's kind of the cutthroat nature of college football. When it comes to quarterbacks, I mean, you're on a time limit. I mean, you're literally on the clock from the day that freshman walks on campus you've got him a max of 3 seasons most times, and sometimes less than that. I mean, Caleb Williams transferred after freshman year, and you know, and he's not the only guy. Quinn Ewers transferred after his freshman year. So it's difficult. You want to get those guys on the field as soon as you possibly can. So it just kind of the environment of college football and where we're at right now. Courtney Harper says, with all our weapons, do you think we will go more up-tempo, no huddle to get more plays? I mean, I don't think so, because that is very anti-Jim Harbaugh. Like that's not really been his forte since he's been at Michigan. He's been a big, you know, run the ball, clock management, ball control offense, like a run run first scheme. Not to say they don't do no huddle, they do that at times, but overall, I don't see that happening just because of for Jim Harbaugh, his makeup has always been let's run the football, limit mistakes, we'll punt it, play defense, and we'll rock and roll that way. So that's what I think will probably happen. Rob J says Kate has 2 more years left too. It's got to be JJ or no way he stays. I mean, JJ seems like he is very, very, very all in on Michigan. Like and it's difficult because there's no way to know. Like you can't give him a truth serum or anything like that. But he seems like he just absolutely loves it at Michigan. I mean, he's trying to recruit other guys, guys that he played with at IMG Academy, I believe. No, he didn't go to. Did he go to IMG? Can't remember. But nonetheless, recruiting guys that he played with in high school, he seems to be all in. So maybe he wouldn't, but I am a big believer that a kid like that who's not gonna start is going to transfer. That's how I feel about it without knowing any personal info about JJ. I think he's going to transfer, but I think he's going to transfer if he's not either starting or playing a lot the first, early on in the season. But it's difficult to call. It's difficult to call because, yeah, I didn't see any, issue or ill will or anything like that with JJ last year, but he got to play. So I don't know if the two quarterback system is going to continue to be a thing and be successful, but it's probably going to be a thing. So there's there's so much that's up in the air. So as much as Michigan has returning, there's just so many questions as well. So Dependent Fanatic says the offense has a roster to do everything with JJ. I think so. You've got enough guys who are explosive. You've got the running backs. JJ can throw it, which we saw in the Georgia game, and he's got the legs too to add another element to the offense that can really change things and put the defense in a bind. So we'll see what happens. We will see what happens. Let's see. So Cade was awful in the spring game though. JJ as fall camp still. JJ's got to get healthy. Number one, that's first and foremost. And then after that, we'll see what happens. And One Scoop John says, yeah, Harbaugh is stubborn as we know and usually prefers a more experienced quarterback. Yep, I agree. Let's see. Yeah, Otis John says Michigan has so many offensive weapons they'll be hard to stop. It's true, but you also have to you got to dial them up and make sure that they make sure you get them open. I mean, it's more than just just having the guys. You've got to put them in spots to be successful. One Scoop John, JJ said he won't transfer. I don't think he's lying, but what I will also say is have you ever met a 19-year-old who's never changed his mind on anything? And I get it. This is a huge decision for him, and he doesn't need to cross that bridge right now. But it's one of those things where, I mean, yes, he's saying that now. But if someone told him like, okay, you said you're not going to transfer. What if you don't start a single game and you don't play at all this fall? I think he'd probably rethink that a little bit. But like I said, that bridge doesn't need to be crossed because that's not going to happen. Number one thing, he just needs to get healthy. And after that, I think all bets are off. So we'll see what happens with the quarterback decision that Jim Harbaugh has to make. But I think it was made a lot tougher with JJ not being healthy in the spring. And and it's probably looking like Cade will be QB1, but you never know. Jim Harbaugh could surprise us all and start JJ, and the JJ era will have begun. So we'll see. That is it for me, everybody. I appreciate. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please like and subscribe. We will be back here next week. And that is it. Also, make sure you subscribe to Mark's main channel. He will be on the talking more about the national news when it comes to college football. So if you are a Michigan fan, please like and subscribe here, because this will be the main area where all of the Michigan topics will be discussed. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Definitely appreciate it. You guys have a good one.